Oh, there we go. You can't say anything bad. Hi, everybody. Tracy Stark with Eating at a Meeting podcast, and I am here at the IACC America's Knowledgefest in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, at the Ridge Conference Center, which is part of Verizon. And I have these two wonderful gentlemen with me to talk about food and beverage trends today. And today we actually have a live studio audience. Yay! So, Patrick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon. Patrick Berwald, Senior Vice President, Food and Beverage for Pyramid Global Hospitality. Based in Houston, we're proud to say we have close to 200 different diverse assets, resorts, hotels, conference centers across the country and outlying territories. And then we have a great partnership with Hamilton Hotel Partners over in Europe. But happy to be here.
Nice
Thank
to
you.
have you. Felix.
Hi, Felix Maietta, Corporate Executive Chef with Nestlé Professional. Prior to joining Nestlé 5 years ago, I was with Sodexo and Sodexo Conference Centers, and I supported then Sean Anderson, who was my VP, supported all the conference centers in North America for Sodexo. And now with Nestlé Professional, I'm happy to continue my relationship with IACC and be involved and be a support.
Awesome. So in today's panel, we're going to talk about food and beverage, a variety of different things, but you've got a planner, a hotelier, and then the supplier. So you've got the food chain, except for the farmer, right? So we're going to talk about it from a lot of different topics from across the board and how it impacts all of us. And please, please, please ask us questions because we do want to make sure that we're addressing what your concerns are. So one of the topics that I really like in you guys benchmark Pyramid Hospitality Group. Did I say that right? Pyramid Global Hospitality. Put out a food and beverage trends report at the beginning of the year. And I like at the very beginning of their report, it says mega movements such as food and beverage in 2024 as premiumization or enhancing value perception combined with the notion of deeply personal experiences forms the perfect framework for attracting customers. So we're really going to look at what all of that means, like premium, I can't say the word, but premiumization means, and then experiences across the board. So what is premiumization and enhancing the value perception from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. So premiumization is really communicating to the customer the exclusivity and the superior quality of a product. And that really goes hand in hand with value. I think we're at a real inflection point in our industry where we've definitely charged very high prices. We've pushed down all operating costs. It's hitting the customer straightforward. And the real barrier is to ensure that the customer understands the value for price paid. That's going to come with premiumization. It's going to come with experience. And we'll get into it later, but it's going to come through different ways that we engage with the guest and really offer ways to enrich. But I think that sets the tone for where we are today.
Yeah. And from your perspective of Nestlé, are you seeing a level of premiumization?
We are, and our focus is supporting and showing that value to our partners, mm-hmm. Patrick or the conference center channel or whoever is in that lodging channel. That we are focusing our efforts to support the labor challenges that we have across the board. Sustainability challenges, all the points of premiumization that you convey to your customer, we're from a support side, helping the venues to do that through our products and mm-hmm. services. It could be a new coffee line that we're bringing on. It could be I'm a chef consultant, so I can go and be a consultant for your organization to say, let me help you, rationalize some SKUs. Let me help you strategize for the future so that you get the most value for your money that you can, in turn, pass that to your customer and obtain that business.
Okay, so I'm going to jump on that as a meeting planner. The most value for my money, Patrick. I am actually planning 3 events right now and planning and spending money on food and beverage. And I want that premiumization, but I also need it to meet my budget. I mean, I have a food and beverage spend that I have to meet, but I want that experience.
Sure.
as well. How do I partner with you with, how do we partner across the board, all three of us, to elevate that experience? And Felix, I want you to bring in your whole conference experience from last week too. But how do I, and I'm going to put this word out there because Jesse also said it too, trust you to give me the price that I want with that experience that I expect.
Yeah. So there's a lot there to unpack. So I think it really starts off with the notion of, the days of a 80-page banquet menu are over. We no longer can hand those over to a client and just be the order taker. And there's a lot of great ideas and creativity in those sometimes, but what we lack is the personalization of sitting down with the client, and that could be the chef, it could be our conference services team, and just asking the question, what's value for you? What's experience you're trying to convey to your attendees? And go from there and plan the event and have that idea of customization with that client, and that we're understanding budgetary constraints, we're understanding what the menu psychographics of the clientele is, what they want to eat, what's important to them. And then we get into experiences. And meanwhile, the operator in me is thinking, okay, what is a product I can get at a low cost? Where are partnerships with Nestlé that maybe is a ready-made product that fits the category of what I'm trying to accomplish from a budgetary perspective? And all these things start to play in mind. So I'm actually building a program that makes sense for the operation and a striving margin, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we're delivering a customized perceived value.
All right, so I want to bring up something that I brought up when we were chatting about this before. I'm a meeting planner who has in the past said, I want to take the dessert from lunch and use it as my afternoon break because I don't want to spend that extra money. I am, and I have taught that.
So bad.
I have taught that. Exactly.
You'll just blame it on the chef. That's what happens.
Exactly. Well, I also think that we don't need to eat that much food because I'm also on a food waste trend here. I don't want to feed people a dessert then that how many of those desserts are left on the table at the end of lunch and not eaten that are going to go into the landfill because not all properties have a composting process or not, so I mean, and I am doing an event at one of Patrick's properties in a couple of months. And she said to me, my goal is for you to spend more money with me, Tracy, not take the money from that. So I understand that, but I think it's working with her then to figure out, like you said, sitting down with the chef and designing my menu so that I'm not worried about it. And maybe my desserts are smaller at lunch. Can we do that? So that we're not double over giving sugar 25 times over.
Yeah, I think there's an element of retraining a legacy mindset from a meeting attendee. So, for example, doing more batch cookery and microplating to where there's a perception it's hotter and fresher, but we're not putting out aircraft carrier buffets with large chafing dishes. Because food waste is something we talk about all the time. It's catchphrase, but for us, put in perspective, 10 of our hotels today account for 40% of our food buy. Right, so you look at that coupled with an average for our industry is about 7 pounds of food waste for every occupied room. We did 7 million occupied rooms last year.
Wow.
So you look at those factors, it's a huge impact. So part of the equation is to, again, re-educate the legacy consumer, but also make sure we effectively communicate the right thing to do from a responsibility standpoint, right? And I think there's ways to achieve still a great experience for the consumer. We just do it in a little bit different way. And it goes back to what I said earlier. It's all about that pre-planning conversation.
Right. Yeah.
And value perception.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then, and bringing, those partners in your food and beverage providers and knowing what they're doing. And just before we started, you were talking about how you can go to one of your purveyors and say, okay, I want to try these products out. And they actually have the equipment that I have in my kitchen, and you're able to try those foods out on that to see how it, can you talk a little bit about that?
It's real. We have, our Nestlé Professional Innovation Kitchen in Solon, Ohio. And then we have every piece of food service equipment known to mankind in this innovation center. And so you're developing menus and you want to put together a great strategy. we can invite you to our innovation kitchen and test run it. And, so that you will know for certain in real time, hey, is this recipe going to work? Is this, thought process on this menu relevant? Is it really going to work? Can I execute it, boots on the ground? And so I think, that partnership is huge. And I think that it's a great advantage for everybody, because that what you're getting from a value perception is tried and true. And I think it just makes sense. And it can help you make those decisions, even on portioning and how you microplate and what you plate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We know what people are going to eat. We know what they're not going to eat. So, sometimes it's a balancing act, but I think that if you have the opportunity to really test it out, take it for a test drive, I think it's a valuable, being a valuable partner.
Yeah.
And not to jump ahead, but you'd start talking about the human capital factor here and the really challenge that we're having from a recruitment standpoint and hiring, well-trained, seasoned staff. It doesn't exist anymore, right? So, from a recruiting standpoint, we're going down to grassroots level and recruiting in institutions and trade technical colleges and things like that. But, we have to be mindful of who's receiving the raw product and do they have the skill, our team have the training ability to make sure that they're getting most yield out of that product, or do we do more ready-made and integrate that into what we do? Still high quality, but understanding what are we dealing with from a labor perspective.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we call it speed scratch in the industry. We're gonna do some work in-house because we have to. It's just prudent and cost-effective thing to do. But how can I bring products in that maybe are ready to use to finish a dish, or a sauce that's ready to use, or a base that's ready to use? Looking at not only does it taste great, does it look great, but how safe is it?
Right.
What's the backstory? Is it ready to eat? Has it been tested? Does it need a kill step? I mean, these are all critical decisions when you're trying to do a speed scratch application and make it not only simple for your staff, but protect your organization from any missteps. So again, it's a balancing act, and that's where that true partnership.
Yeah. All right. So we mentioned food waste. So I want to jump into the sustainability aspect of this too. Who was on the food tour the other day with me? I chatted with the farmer after the fact, Melinda, and because she's going to be on the show next Wednesday. One of the things that she said to me, which brings us into experience as sustainability, is that, they're growing everything there. They're doing it farm to table, farm to spa, farm to bar. But I like the fact that she's like, we have to she as a farmer wants to create an experience in the restaurant to get people there. But because everybody can order things on Amazon, they can order anything from Target or DoorDash or whatever. So with the food and beverage, she as the farmer wants to help the chef and the culinary team create that experience when they sit down to the table. So how can we, from a food manufacturer perspective, as well as the food service maker, how can we create that experience? And when we're looking at next gen experiences, Felix, you just had that experience last week. How do we meld all of those things together so that we're not only being sustainable and doing farm to table truly, and not greenwashing it, but also bring in the people to eat the food?
Yeah.
That was a lot too.
So a couple things, farm to table and local, right? Very catchphrase, buzzworthy, right? We've all heard them. Farm to table is truly the definition of A to B. It's the farmer to the operator who's going to execute it. No distributor, no retail component, A to B, right? Local is truly defined as anything within a 400-mile radius of your operation from a sourcing perspective. So we have to go back and make sure, quote unquote, truth in menu, we're abiding by that for obvious reasons and making sure that we're honest with our consumer. But, it's not easy to do. We have a couple of hotels we're lucky to be able to really tell that story in Turtle Bay out in Hawaii. We have Chatham Bars Inn we just acquired in Chatham, just north of Boston. These actually have farms literally within 10-minute drive of the property, working farms. They're producing produce at a scale that can, again, fulfill the hotel's needs, which is the other factor here, right? We have to look at it from an operations perspective. If we're going to tell that story, we have to be able to actually get the product to execute it and fulfill the needs of the meetings and events and restaurants. So it's a delicate dance of integrating that, telling that story, but making sure, we're not on the fly subbing for something else and not being true to who we are. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of that, but when you have that, it's a very powerful story.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
We want to tell the story of our partners. We want to create opportunities for education. With these two examples I mentioned, we definitely get guests and groups out there from an experiential standpoint. We do true farm to table dinners and events where we're not just feeding people, but we're educating people on how things are grown, how they're harvested, the sustainability of that from a farming perspective. It's really powerful.
And do you know who your farmers are that you could introduce Patrick to them if they're buying it from you?
Absolutely not.
Farmer Journal.
Okay.
Well, Nestlé is the largest food manufacturing company in the world. So we have a tremendous footprint across the globe. So we also have a tremendous sustainability story for each channel that we have, from our coffee partners to our miners plant in Solon, Ohio. We are part of the whole Ohio Proud by Ohio. So we source a lot of ingredients, our fresher ingredients in Ohio whenever we can. But we focus on, being a good world citizen. What does our carbon footprint look like? What are we doing in recycling channels? What are we doing with our packaging? How are we making all of our packaging more sustainable and more friendly to the environment? So Nestlé has a tremendous responsibility because of who we are, but we understand how important what we do in the eyes that are upon us, how important that they are. And so we are very, very focused on sustainability, health, nutrition, and wellness. But it's from 50,000 feet because we're so large. And because we're so large, the decisions that we make have a greater and broader impact. So we're very focused on all of this. Farm to table, I can't say that we're farm to table, but I think that we're good world citizens, and it's a focus for us, and it's front and center. It's one of our pillars, and it's something that we will continue to focus on.
And so Patrick's got this can of still water here, and I've got the sparkling one. Last week on Global Meetings Industry Day, I interviewed the director of sustainability for IMEX, which is the largest meetings industry conference, and meet the gentleman for director of sustainability from Meet Green, who works with them. They are going so minute in understanding their carbon footprint. And I think, and I don't know where your SDGs are coming from and what directions you're getting from your clients above on how you're managing your SDGs, but they're going so far to find out how much water is being used to produce the plastic bottle that the water is served in or sold in.
Yeah.
So are we able to, and are you working towards getting that granular to really say, hey, here's my carbon footprint for this event?
Yeah. I mean, make no mistake about it. People are looking at our sustainable efforts, our recycling efforts, sourcing efforts, and making those decisions to meet, eat, feed, sleep at our properties, right? And I think we have a long way to go, just to be totally transparent.
It's not going to happen overnight, for sure.
A product like this, great. It's a nice next step. I think, Mike's in the room, right? I think he just did it for cost savings, but there's things like that we can do that send a great message. But I think the real opportunity for our business is to meaningfully do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not the experts, right? We have to partner with somebody that's powerful in the industry who does this and helps us tell the story effectively, because they want that. It's got, so many great companies now are creating their own platforms of sustainability that we have to acknowledge that and align with it.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and that's going to come down to you all being able to say, hey, from that 500 level thing, but
Yeah.
also coming down to be able to report that.
But so that you can understand, a couple of examples, our miners plant in, outside of Cleveland, is the zero landfill. And it has been for almost 3 years now. One of Nestlé's goals for 2026 is to be 60% zero landfill at our manufacturing facilities. So it's a huge task. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think that, the importance, for us being a resource to our partners and operators is that we care and we can help you tell your story, and we want to be able to be that resource.
Yeah. All right. In your food and beverage trends report, you mentioned under sustainability, brewing, upcycling, regenerative, and personalized in a variety of different categories. So in the innovation session yesterday, we saw TJ's facility in, I don't remember where it was, but Chef Philip, he's upcycling the skins of different foods and he's dehydrating them.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see venues taking the scraps from food, the carrot peels, all of that, and upcycling it to make broth or upcycling it to do whatever? How can we do that? And then from the food and beverage tour too was the brewing facility that we went to visit, and they're taking all of their spent grain and donating it to pig farmers or donating it to bakeries to make bread. So how can the facilities, the back of the house, do this economically and usefully?
Yeah, it's a tough situation because not everybody's got those resources, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, our job, especially given the diversity of our portfolio, is to connect the operators with best practices or partnerships to be able to do things like that. So a couple of call outs, if you're familiar with ORCA, ORCA, which is a food digestive type of, it's a big bin, right? And it has enzymes in it, and it breaks down materials. You can put everything in there with the exception of bone and shells from seafood, right? And it will digest everything, and it will extract all the water, and you can put it right down the drain. But what's left can be used for soil and farming. And there's opportunities at La Quinta where we use it today, and they use it to do their herb garden. People even pick it up and will use it for farming, municipal farming purposes. You mentioned the pig farmers. We have a couple of properties like that. Skamania Lodge up in Washington State, which is one of our properties. They partner with a pig farmer, and they collect all that waste and they use it to feed the hogs. And those hogs are in a partnership that we have from a pork sourcing perspective. So it's full cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the key is, again, it's exposing people to those opportunities and where they can do it. Yes, it's not a one size fits all.
Right.
Everybody can't do it, but I think more and more the consumer is getting onto this as to what we can do. And it's kind of forced the situation on us that we're going to have to find solutions like that to not put more in landfill and not produce more waste, but meaningfully use it in an effective way.
Simon from Y Boston, he won the Innovation Award last year for what they're doing on their property. And they have one of those digesters, or they have a composter, I want to say. They can compost breakfast by lunchtime. And they're giving that compost to the gardening team because they've got a lot of property out there, putting it on their gardens and on their trees. They plant a tree for every guest who turns down room service, I guess. And so they're putting that compost on those trees. And it's such good compost that the golf courses ask them not to give it to them as much because the grass is growing too fast and they're having to mow the lawns too much. So it's a full cycle thing here, but so it means that it's good. We're doing it so well. But not everybody can have that or do that.
Right.
The coffee brewer that we went to the other day here in Jersey, and I know in my local Starbucks, they do it too. They're taking their used coffee grounds after brewing the coffee. They're bagging it up in the bags that were shipped, the beans were shipped in, and putting it on their front stoop for the consumers in the neighborhood to come pick up and put on their flowers in their gardens. So that's another way too. If you're a facility, you can take those grounds and be a community service, sell it, or just give it away, right? In doing that. Okay. Battling inflation and the guest choice of dining out. So, and I know I've mentioned it 3 times. I want to battling inflation. It's a meeting planner. I have spreadsheets of how many percentage of people came to this event this specific food and beverage last year, and how many do I expect to come to this year, et cetera. Because I don't want to over order to manage the food waste. But we also have Gen Z, and Felix, you had this experience last week going to the Nestlé conference. So can you tell everybody what you visualized in that event?
It was a great conference and very, breakfast, lunch, dinner breaks. We had about 500 folks attending, and there was a large Gen Z population in attendance, and we saw throughout all day parts that the Gen Zers kind of wanted to be off in their own group, not going through the buffet lines and food lines, but ordering food in from their apps and kind of doing their own thing and having their own experience, making their own experience. It was, we were in Phoenix, and it was beautiful, and the surroundings were great. And so from a meeting planner point, I'm thinking there's probably 100, 125 folks that were paid for in the meal package, not even from the meal package, but spending probably money they're going to expense on their expense.
That's what I was just going to ask you. They're putting it on their P card and expensing it.
But that's the world we live in now, so I know, Patrick, you probably, are faced with similar scenarios because you're trying to capture every food and beverage revenue dollar that you can, and then you're in competition with
How many apps did you say they had?
8 to 10 different food apps on their phone.
Which boggles my mind because it's like 3 times as much money to get to pay that delivery fee.
But they don't care. That's what they know.
Right.
Yeah.
They're the 3rd generation.
They're raised on technology.
With technology,
I gave my daughter an Etch a Sketch, and she started pushing the screen. Right? She doesn't know what that is. No, she was disappointed it didn't work. Yeah, it's impulse and it's convenience, and they don't want to deal with people.
Correct.
They want it when they want it, and they're fine with the 0 human contact. I think it goes back to menu psychographics and knowing your customer and knowing what we need to do to meet their demand. But you talk about the value for price just from a restaurant perspective, right? When you look at the cost of inflation year over year, the cost of dining out has gone up 5 times comparatively to the cost of actually going to the store and buying your own groceries. Mm-hmm. So when we look at some of our destination hotels on the independent side, we're seeing 30 to 40% local capture, which means those customers at risk of even coming to us as a consumer, right? They're like, it's cheaper for me to just go and cook at home, right? So we have to constantly battle that. And it goes back to what we started with. It's premiumization and telling the story and finding opportunities to drive value through enriching partnerships and products. But it is a challenge, and we're constantly fighting that now.
And so, or go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and even, beyond the standard food and beverage packages, I think it's important that, you want to capture revenue 24/7 if you can. So now You're seeing a lot of micro markets springing up in conference centers and hotels, meeting that out of home need whenever. Doesn't cost anything. It could be a refrigerator or a freezer filled with retail products, and they can take it back to their room and microwave it, or if there's a station set up. So, food and beverage is certainly not limited to meal periods anymore. It's 24/7. And so
and we're doing things like meal kits, ready-made meal kits where you can order it pre-stay, or they're available in grab-and-go markets that we have in our hotels. We're doing things like ghost kitchens. You've heard of ghost kitchens, right? Where we're actually deceiving the guests a little bit, and we have concepts and models built behind facing, but we're competing with those apps directly. but it's our infrastructure that's doing it.
Interesting. Well, even coming here, I flew through from Raleigh, and they basically have a ghost kitchen. There is a stall there that you go up and you push the buttons. There is not a counter. It is not a restaurant. You push the buttons and then your food is put in a locker and you have the code to open the locker and then you get your food out.
Yep.
And there was probably about 15 people in line to go up to that kiosk and do that. And then coming back, and it's just a kitchen in the back of it's basically your kitchen in the back of the house making food with a variety. I didn't go up to the kiosk to see what was offered, but it's a concept that's been around. I think they've had that for at least 4 years now. Yeah. So, I mean, I did see something that ghost kitchens are not necessarily going to stay with the thing, or do you think they're still going to be viable?
No, I think that they've kind of fizzled out for the most part, but I think our industry, the lodging industry, has actually started to find a way on how we make it happen. We still have guests that are coming in our hotels with, bags from the gas station of snacks and beverages. Again, the root cause is look at the travel and the cost from A to B for the consumer, air flights and transportation, and just the stress of travel these days. And you see pizza delivery, you see all these things that we have to compete with. We want capture in our hotels, but we have to come up with a different way to go after them.
Well, even I was producing an event a couple years ago, and the whole lobby was filled with people waiting for their pizza delivery or whatever because their restaurants weren't open.
Yep.
And I mean, and granted, that was still coming out of COVID, but it was how do you battle that, right? And I mean, and this property is different because we're private, but there's not someplace you're definitely going to be using your apps because there's not really a place to walk to from here to go out and get it. How are you? Well, we kind of already covered that, minimizing food waste in the back of the house, but I want to jump on the personalization aspect of this too. In my presentation yesterday, looking at menu design based on different dietary restrictions, reducing costs by saying, hey, these multiple items meet these different dietary restrictions. How can we do that personalization, being safe, but also helping you reduce your costs and you provide products that meet those needs, and the meeting planner being able to not pull their hair out or turn gray right here, because I'm trying to figure out how to feed multiple people with different dietary restrictions. Was there a question in that?
I think, yeah.
Well, as far as dietary restrictions, I mean, we focus on health, nutrition, and wellness. We have gluten-free items, certified gluten-free items. We have vegetarian items. We have vegan items. And, we can verify to the source. Like we know that we don't process any sugar through bone char. That's one of our standards. We're very rigorous.
Does everybody know that sugar is not vegan? Because it has bone char in it. You have to buy certified vegan sugar.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so when we make a claim like that, it's to the source. And but it's funny because I want to talk about personalization.
Yep.
So that I was in conference centers for many, many years, and we were always trying to be on the cutting edge of how do we make it different? How do we make the food experience better, the food memories better? And we were just chatting earlier today, having a cup of coffee, and I said, I think that we can use technology to develop menus and develop food stations that mirror a Panera or a popular restaurant that Gen Zers like to go pick up from, and maybe we intertwine it into a CVEN app. I don't know how it works yet. It's just kind of. Usually I get those ideas on my third Manhattan. Have dinner with my wife. When I get to the second one, she starts taking notes because some good ideas come up. But I think that we have to think really outside of the box. We really have to get away from the breakfast, lunch, dinner, break mindset. And maybe you do something with your regular day parts at a ghost kitchen. I don't know what it is, but sitting around in the think tank, providing the solution, which is going to be here because that's where everybody's going to go. And, you know, maybe, hey, let's skip the buffet line. I don't want my senior manager to see me today. I want to be in flip flops and shorts and go hang by the pool. Let me just do that, order it, pay for it, go pick it up, or maybe if it's even included, that's, I'll let you fight that battle.
Right.
You know, maybe they can use the leftover dessert.
So much.
But that's where I think that we're going. I mean, I think we're going to have to evolve into what our customers want.
And I want to say too, the customer is not me as the meeting planner. The customer is my 500 attendees.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, me as the meeting planner, picking the food from that 80-page menu, right, is a challenge in and of itself. But I'm trying to feed all of these 500 people. I mean, I did an event at MGM years ago, and I was just on the food and beverage team. We were feeding 4,000 to 7,000 people for lunch per day, and we had 685 people with dietary restrictions. And it was a multi-cart golf cart train of plates that came out. And we also have to think about how we implement that, how we execute that experience.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people with dietary restrictions get their plate last,
Yeah.
right? Or how does that work? Or in that situation, they didn't even know they were supposed to stop and pick it up at a place, and they're all the way on the other side of the conference center, right? Or the convention center. So figuring out that personalization, and is there that place? Can you make it that fun destination? And we actually were talking about food trucks before.
Yep.
How do we create that sort of experience or small town experience in a conference center environment?
Yeah, I want to tag on to what you said about allergens, and that's becoming a real point of conversation in a lot of states. Food code was just updated. There's a lot more transparency for the consumer on what allergens they may be at risk to in our facilities. So the labeling, the education, the training from a culinary production standpoint is paramount. And you know, there's things that we have to recognize are frankly liability for us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not just to keep our guests safe, but just to do the right thing, right? So it's something that we're challenging our teams with, to go back and educate themselves and making sure that their teams are clearly understanding of what the risk is. Because it's getting real,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But you know, to talk about the customization and things like that, I think when we look at two sides of the coin from an operator's perspective. There's menu engineering, and then there's menu psychographics. Engineering is understanding the data points, what's selling, what's not selling, what's got a high margin potential, and then there is that exercise of tweaking and modifying that menu so it makes sense from a business perspective. Then there's the psychographics, right? Understanding your customer. We talked about Gen Z, you know, it's younger, higher expendable income. They want to learn, they want to be enriched, they want to be educated, they want that experience. And it's no longer picked from ABC, right? It's what that consumer wants. You know, we talk a lot about wellness these days, and everybody wants wellness. Well, it's far beyond that. It's, you know, it's prebiotic, probiotic, it's brain wellness, it's vitamin K foods, leafy greens, you know, fermented milks, all these things that the average consumer doesn't really understand. But our opportunity as the operator is to integrate that, right, meaningfully where it makes sense.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to smack people in the face with it too much. People still want to have fun, creative, craveable foods, but do it in a way where we're almost from a DEI perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're understanding that consumer and crafting an experience for them too. Same thing in a bar environment. You know, you have a lot of zero-free cocktails, right?
Yeah.
ABV. And, you know, you see a lot of restaurants, bars, even in the banquet and catering section, is, you know, you have a craft cocktail zero-based. Right now it's all integrated into your regular cocktails, and frankly at the same price point.
Yeah.
And we're doing that because we're spending a lot of time meaningfully crafting and sourcing those cocktails. So there's value, but from a DEI perspective, you know, you could not be a drinker, or
Right.
you want to get up
Be
at
pregnant.
7 a.m. tomorrow and be productive,
Mhm.
right? But you still want to be part of the party, right?
Yeah.
So we're being mindful of that from a consumer perspective.
I think it's really cool. What's really cool about that is, it wasn't long ago we were talking about, specialized menus, gluten-free, vegan, halal, whatever, and we were sitting around and said, somebody shouldn't have to change their dietary needs to come to a conference, right? We should be all things for everybody, and they should be made to feel just as normal as anybody else, right? They shouldn't have to wait to get their food last. They shouldn't have to go through any drama. And I see that now happening on the beverage side, and it, like you said, it's inclusive. Like, we're providing a place for everybody. And I think I always say that at the end of the day, we're in hospitality, right? So you have to be hospitable. You have to learn how to be hospitable. You have to want to be hospitable. It's not a drudgery. It's not like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and you've got employees here. Vincente, who just got promoted I'm looking at you. Do you work at this property? No, never mind. Wrong guy. So he
Stay with the zero alcohol.
I know. Yeah. I have been for 5 years now. So, but, he speaks limited English, but he understood, he grasped what I was trying to say to him, and he loves his job, but he just got promoted from a food, expediter basically to a server. And his love for what he was doing is very showing in that, but it is educating that value of that to the people who love to do their job. But I also I went to an industry event, and they're like, hey, here's a mocktail. And I'm like, okay, great. And I took a sip of it, and the flavor was good. And I'm like, what is it? It's cheer wine and Fresca. I'm like, you can have this back now, please, right? And I don't want my drinks with soda, and that's the functional foods. I don't want my mocktail to be juice loaded with sugar.
Yeah.
I want it to be farm to bar, and using freshly juiced things, or using the brand of Spiritless, or using the brand of Ritual. My dad can't drink alcohol anymore because of this medication. And he has a gin drink every day from Ritual non-alcoholic gin and his buddies come over, and he is so happy. I think we're getting delivered 3 times a month because my dad's drinking it so much. So adding that in, so we're spending the money. And the stat that I used yesterday, I think it's 64% of people who are buying the non-alcoholic beverages are people who still do drink.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's because 30% of people do not drink after they don't drink at all, or they stop drinking after one drink. So you have the opportunity to make a buttload of money.
Yeah.
By selling a non-alcoholic beverage that's not a soda, because your margin is going to be higher than on a Coke.
Sure.
Well, depending on what you negotiated, but yeah. So figuring out how to do that to make that inclusion experience happen at the bar is just as important.
Mm-hmm.
All right, staffing and training. We've got this challenge of making sure that everybody's trained when we're coming in, and getting people. And Jesse asked that question today. This industry is not 9 to 5, right? It is 6:30 a.m. until midnight sometimes, and whoever you've got it. So we have to make it enticing. How do we and the food and beverage teams, but there are people who in the food and beverage side that have worked at properties for 30 something years. They love their job, but how do we get a Gen Z to understand that and to be so valuable in that, and then keep your costs low of managing that, of managing the labor, but executing and getting them involved?
Yeah, I think the true secret sauce is making sure there's opportunities for people to advance and learn and grow from a technical and a personal standpoint. We have people coming into our business who want instant gratification. They want to be thanked at the end of the day, and they want that gold star. We didn't come up in that.
No.
And we have to really recognize that, because that's what they need, right? It's not something that's a perception. It's a fact, right? And I think we have to really understand that. And then you hear a lot about work-life balance. What does that mean to you? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to you? It's all different. And even at the corporate level, I have people on my team. I have to be very sensitive to the fact that we are a 24/7 business, but at the end of the day, there are people too, and we all have work-life balance, and making sure that's meaningfully expressed and actually lived for them is really critical. People are jumping for another $10,000-$20,000 a year.
Yeah.
Right. It's inconsequential, but I'm a believer that people don't jump and change jobs because of the money. It's because of the experience they're getting from an employer standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, and Ellie, I'm not talking. Oh, yeah. Sorry. My niece works for a company and she worked a convention recently. And I mean, she's 23 and she's like, oh my God, I had to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning and we worked until 10 o'clock at night. And where's my comp time and all this? And then she's on the communication side of it. And so it is that, right? And how do you, and she's like, she was calculating her hours to see how many days off she got, comped after that. But it is something that is being thought by not just my niece, but by a variety of young people that are coming into the workforce. And I do think that there are some kids, and I'm not going to bunch them all together or separate them all, that are willing to work really hard.
Absolutely.
They understand that job. They want to get it done. But it is an industry that we have to figure out. And I want to jump to the training aspect of kind of going back to the you mentioned it, training and communications around the allergen part. I was at a food allergy safety summit last month, and I sat on the panel with the head of global food safety for Marriott, as well as one of their trainers. And Marriott is making it brand standard that everybody in the food service side of it has to go through food allergy training. And it's in their LMS, and it was reiterated, how do you educate them? And it's not just throwing them, hey, go take this class online, right? Now you have to reiterate it. So how do we do that in team meetings or in the 15-minute staff call before the banquet goes live? How do we continue to reinforce not just the allergen training, but any other kind of training or SOPs that we have across the board?
Yeah, I think it's multiple layers. We partner with EcoSure, and they're a great resource, a global partner. We have customized training platforms like Lobster Inc.
Okay.
So we're doing some specialized training, not just in food safety and sanitation, but allergens and other things people need to be more mindful of. The pre-shift topic, it's all these layers of inundating the teams with opportunities to either expose our partners or just frankly educate. Again, there's a lot of technicality to some of this stuff where they just don't understand it. And for us as the leaders is we have to do it in a way that's palatable and consumable by our team members, and they get it, and safely make sure they understand the risk and liability and how they're at the front lines. And we're arming them with information to take care of our guests.
I mean, I say it all the time. I mean, they're your ambassadors.
Absolutely.
They're the ones, chefs in the back for the most part, they're the ones out there showcasing your property to you, showcasing, and I mean, they're not out there on your showcasing Nestlé product,
No.
but how are you managing staffing wise coming up through the manufacturers to help your partners in food service?
Well, training, but, I want to address the part because I did spend 35 years in the kitchen.
Right.
And let me just say this, it all begins, success begins and ends or fails in the kitchen at the back door, right? So training, your chefs, your cooks, your porters, anybody that touches food should be highly trained on allergen awareness. Can't be any cross contact, making sure that we're storing foods properly in the right places. We have to sequester a product to a different portion of the kitchen where that's your purple zone. So it begins and ends with really, really strict training. And then that has to spill over to the front of the house. And there has to be training amongst all of the supervisors, the banquet captains, anybody in the front of the house, so that it's not an afterthought, it's a priority. And I think that When people understand that it's life and death, and it can be life and death for people, then you get their attention. And we always used EcoSure with Sodexo as well, and they had some pretty crazy videos that were very well done, but it scared the bejeebus out of you, and then you get some of the people where their eyes are like this, like, yeah, that can happen. So, training. From our standpoint at Nestle, I mean, it's rigorous sourcing. That's where it starts with us. Everything is tested. Nothing, our plants are so locked down that nothing gets in the back door unless it is fully screened and passes the battery of scientific testing. I mean, I've seen videos on it. We can't even get into the factory, the miner's plant anymore. It's that locked down, and it needs to be that way. So, from an operator standpoint, you want to be looking towards partners that understand your risk, right? Because we share the same risk. If we tell you that something is allergen free, you can really be sure that we probably spent a couple $1 million making sure that it's allergen free, right? Because we're going to distribute it, across the United States.
Yep.
Right.
So, and I put my chef's hat back on because, sometimes it's not about price. It's about the value, right? So I don't play in the pricing sandbox. I can't do that because the value that we offer doesn't fit in that sandbox. The operator has to make the decision, where am I going to spend my dollars? And if food safety and allergen safety and awareness isn't at the top of your list, then I think I'm going to go to a different venue because,
Sure.
Yeah. All right. And we've been chatting this whole time, and I want to ask questions, but I also want to throw Ben in on this conversation because Ben's in the UK, and the UK has, for 10 years, we figured it out. 10 years had very strict, in the EU in general, very strict food allergen labeling laws. They have 14 allergens. They have to label for celery, mustard, lupine, shellfish are separate, gluten, and sulfites. Outside of the 9 that we have. From your perspective, what has been your biggest challenge and or success in managing this? And in a conversation that he and I had yesterday, it's not the front of the house staff. It ends up being on his shoulders. So can you, and you're not on the microphone, and I'll just kind of repeat it, but.
I think in terms of successes, it's peace of mind for us. And obviously 10 years down the line, training is, it's done at the day one when a chef or front house enters the kitchen. It's the buck stops with the chefs at the end of the day. So it's the front house guys come into the kitchen, ask chefs. So it's down to, the chef's responsibility at the end of the day. But for me, it's, banqueting, it's large number of covers, it's peace of mind. You get a pre-order, we know who's coming in, we know what menu they're eating off. We can adjust the menu, and it's not an afterthought. It's the whole table gets served at the same time. But yeah, it is all down to training. And the training is, it's a couple of hours, but it's also on the job knowledge. It's all the hidden things which we then sort of follow up on. So soy sauce and gluten, for instance, and tahini, sesame seeds, and hummus.
Right.
So those little hidden things which are more of a concern than anything else, but it's all down to training. That is absolutely key.
All right, and even the front of the house, and you all tell me when the platter of bacon comes out and it says it's gluten free, and then I look at the bottom of it and there's bread at the bottom to soak up the oil. Who's that? Is that coming from the back of the house, and then the front of the house that actually doesn't know what's happening? And this is not an allergen conversation, but it's SOPs, it's standard of operating procedures from the front of the house and the back of the house to have that conversation.
Yeah, and it's also so many layers of a check and balance before it reaches the consumer, right? So like there's sometimes just an acceptance of what front of the house gets from back of the house, and there's not an opportunity to question it and find a potential issue before it reaches the consumer. But to answer your question, that's not gluten free.
No. Well, okay. So I want to have another. To me, this is a thing with you all being venues. The front of the house and the back of the house are like two separate, you're like, yeah, they fight, right?
Mhm.
And I was chatting with a woman in New Bern where I live, and she's worked in restaurants, and she's gotten servers yelled at by chefs by going back and asking, can you tell me if this is this or this or this? He or she is like, I don't have time for that question. Why are you back here bothering me? And then that front of the house staff person comes back very demoralized, and their level of customer service is now diminished to the server. How do we fix that?
One word: culture.
Yeah.
Right. And having a culture where you have a collaborative team that's constantly looking for ways to improve and constantly has one common goal, and that's driving the business, great experience for the guests, and at the end of the day, safety and protection of our guests and the business.
Yeah, that's 100% right. As my progression throughout the years, I've seen that culture shift. I've had to be open to it, willing to be educated, and willing to teach that, because it is a culture shift. And you can see, as a lot of the older chefs are moving into retirement age, it's a younger generation. They're more aware. It's normal to have gluten-free allergies and nut-free allergies. They grew up with it, so they're sensitive to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that as we continue to foster that culture and be sensitive to it and make it normal, you're not bothering me. This is,
right.
We're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, right? Isn't that the standard? So we should have, from the back of the house, should embrace that philosophy and say, listen, a big part of my job is to teach you how important it is to take care of our guests, whether it's getting them a soda that they like or making sure that their gluten-free meal is gluten-free, right? That's really taking care of
The best leaders now are mentors and teachers.
Right.
Like that gentleman. That's exactly it.
All right, and I want to take that a completely different level, and we're at just a few minutes before 11, but to the cultural aspect. We have a lot of different people from different backgrounds culturally and ethnically that are working in our kitchens and working in the front of the house. I've seen some really good collaborations of chefs and kitchens that are like, oh, wait a minute, you're from Thailand or you're from China or whatever, and can you help me design this menu versus, hey, I'm going to just crapshoot this sushi, or I'm going to crapshoot this Indian dish. I've never cooked it before. Using the people that work for them. Hey, bring me your mother's dishes. Let's incorporate that. Have you seen success in that?
Absolutely. I mean, people get so excited about those opportunities to learn from each other. Somebody you're sitting next to or working next to in the kitchen and learning something from them, and something as special as it could be a family recipe or something that's indigenous to them. We're building out the first ever National Geographic Hotel and Conference Center in Washington, D.C.
Oh, cool.
And we're creating a food hall there. And our stake in the ground is it has to be authentic, literally one step removed if we went to that country and bought it ourselves. So the sourcing, how it's made, we talk about making a banh mi, right? At this station. Well, how is the bread made? What's the flour? What's the water? Minerality content, all of these things that we're thinking about because we want it to be authentic. And I think that runs full circle, right?
Right.
There's a training between colleague and other colleagues, but there's also this opportunity to deliver a great experience through authenticity.
I was just at the University of Maryland, and they built this new dining hall, and it's actually on indigenous land. And so they went to the tribe and said, how can we partner with you to bring this knowledge of the food and beverage into this dining hall? So they meet with them weekly or monthly, and they actually have a whole station in the dining hall that is all indigenous food. And so bringing that in, and along all of the walls through the dining hall is the story of that tribe. And I think that's a really cool thing to help educate these young students on where the land that they're going to school on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, is there anything that we didn't ask that you want us to answer? Yes.
I do have a question, something that's coming on our property, and I wanted to get your input on it. So I find myself on the main center, find myself having to advocate a lot for our clients when it comes to their menus and taking care of their restrictions. So we had a client with their menus that, I mean, it was a long, extensive list.
Mhm.
So it was finding the right meal for her, and unfortunately, she kept getting bland food because there was a lot of spices that she couldn't have. There was a lot of like apples, grapes. So when you think about grapes, it's not just the fruit itself; it's the byproduct, so like a balsamic vinegar, a wine vinegar, sherry. So there were certain things that she couldn't have, and she kept getting bland food. So how do I talk with my back of house, my front of house, to make sure that when they're at our conference center, they're getting the same experience that everybody else is, not just a bland meal?
You guys answer that.
You want to take it from like a culinary talk?
From a culinary topic, I've come across this. I asked them, give me a few recipes that you like, that you eat often, that you make. Let me try and personalize your experience through your eyes and through what you like. For me, it's like a moving target, and when you have somebody that is that sensitive, you can't. You have to go to the source. You have to tell me, how can I make your food taste great? Because I've got 300 other people and probably other dietary restrictions, and for me to try to figure it out is not going to be efficient with my time. When you very easily, I can make you your favorite recipe.
And I think the timing of it too is if you have that information as soon as possible, it gives the chef a lot more time to be able to talk to them and take that middle, like you just said, take the middleman out, talk to them, have the chef talk to them directly.
Mhm.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I mean, our chef is not a people person.
Okay.
True back of the house, like doesn't want to be bothered, just wants to cook, and that's it. And even having him come out during site tours and talking to our clients, it's unfortunately like pulling an arm in the leg. And unfortunately, when it was first brought up, our first instinct was the client to just bring their own food. We should not be doing that.
Right.
And that's what I have to step in and advocate for the client. If they're coming here to have an experience, I'm not telling them to bring their own food.
Right.
Because they might be traveling far and can't.
Right.
So we need to be, so I find myself having to advocate, and I feel like I shouldn't have to, but there should be a conversation where they're willing to also advocate and make sure that that client has a positive experience.
Do you have a sous chef
Yes. and-
that you could
Yes.
lean on?
Yeah.
I would do that.
I mean, it's an education and teaching moment too for that chef that has a hard time with being front face to that customer. It's a golden opportunity. I tell you what, like to create a customized experience and adhere to that particular person's taste. It's hard enough to get clients. Let's have the clients do the selling for us.
Because the other part too, if you're an outward public facility, that's a head in the bed.
Yeah.
And if you do that the right way, that person's going to come back to your city and stay in your hotel because that chef made that meal for them. Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
food memories. Anybody else? What'd you think? Yeah.
I'm a supplier, so I kind of just facilitate the food and beverage aspect.
Uh-huh.
When you come to our facility, but sometimes the first thing I say, we are not a peanut-free facility. Peanuts, I'm in a ballpark. So peanuts are everywhere.
Yep.
It's just, if you have a severe allergy, please ensure that you have your proper medicine and whatever you have. And my first initial conversation is always around dietary restrictions because we're seeing that it's so big now. Whether
Right.
it's one guest that you get a list of 1,000 things, or it's like 60 people and you get an Excel spreadsheet
Yep.
of 20 pages. So I always like to ask it in the initial conversation. However, planners, clients, etc., do not give this information to you until it's like 3 business days before the event, and then you're running around like a chicken without a head trying to get a hold of your culinary team. That's inside. We're dealing with a 10-day homestand with baseball because I can't catch them. Like, how can we kind of like let the planners know how important it is to gather this information? Is that something on your end where it's like you can't get it from your client in time? Like, how can we better have that communication? Because I do my due diligence ahead of time, but then when I don't see that information and then they look at the menu and then my chef is like, well, there's a sulfate allergy, like for example, in a couple of weeks, there's a sulfate allergy, MSG allergy, like literally everything, and nothing on the menu that one guest cannot eat.
Yep.
So it's like we either, they can select a meal of their choice, or we can prepare for them, or the chef can just walk them through each station as to point out what they can and cannot have. But how can we kind of collaborate and work better to obtain that information?
If we can solve that, we'll solve
world problem. Totally. Yeah. It's the bane of my existence. And I teach planners all the time. I mean, you need to track that information from year over year, especially, if it's the same kind of group, but it is planning that. I'm constantly asking my client, because I don't have access to the reg list. I'm like, can you pull me your report? Can you pull me your report? And even one of my clients, the one we're coming to La Cantera, she's like, well, we really don't have anybody with allergies or whatever. And I pulled it, and we've got somebody with a nut allergy cannot be in the room with it. So I'm like, so they're going to go to the extreme and saying nothing on our menu is being planned with any kind of nuts in it. But it really does need to start from that RFP. Like, hey, if you get that RFP from a client, you say, okay, I want to talk dietary restrictions now, right? And have you had any in the past? And use that historical data first before you maybe get those registrations in. But I also think have some chef make a whole menu like that meets a variety of different needs. So you have it in your back pocket that hey, we could chef, I know you're on the fly right now. You got a 10-day homestand. We need to make this dish for this person. And you already have that recipe in your little catalog of recipes that you can pull out, because that's going to make his or her life easier, your life easier. And then you've got it. It's when my one friend, Chef Ashley, she said when she goes to weddings and she's a caterer, so she's like, I've got my bucket over here for any of those last minute things that I need to meet those needs. So from your perspective, design those menus so that you have it. And it reminds me too of Steve Wynn when he still owned Wynn Hotels, right? He got a divorce and was dating a new woman who was on the raw diet or something like that. And he wanted to wine and dine her in his own hotel, and he couldn't because there's nothing for them to eat. So he challenged all of the restaurants and all of the catering teams to come up with menus. And now they have menus that are, here are all the peanut-free ones. Here are all the dairy-free ones. Here are all the dairy-free, gluten-free ones. So you could have those menus already pre-designed and in your Rolodex. I think that's your best solution. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, if I can I piggyback on that for a moment?
Yeah.
Tracy was giving you good solutions, but you have to hold meeting professionals accountable.
Yeah.
And my feeling is in our litigious society, we are all to blame. It's always
Oh,
the chef, it's always the meeting professional on property. I think in my regiment, I would have constant reminders. These are the only people you've told me about. This is what we're preparing for. Constantly hold them accountable, because when the day happens and they point to you, you can say, here are our chain of emails.
Right.
Yep.
Not that we want to call them out, but it won't happen again.
Right.
And my experience is when you cover for them once, their expectation is you're always
Oh,
covering.
you're over.
Yeah. And that's a really good, yeah.
And every email I have received it as a reminder.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Call, like, your event is coming up, and I know for a fact that you told me you were gonna pull something together.
Yep.
Like, why haven't
Yeah.
you given it to me? So it's
Yes.
Put a tagline on your email
Yeah.
signature.
Yeah. It's life and death. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
well, to Chef's point, I teach a food class, and at the opening day, the first thing I say is, congratulations, you can now kill people.
Right. Yeah.
And they all look at you like, what do you mean? And then
Yeah.
you go into obvious.
Yeah. And it doesn't even come, it's not just allergens, it's sanitation. I'm like, are you paying attention to the recalls of the grapefruit or the recalls of the lettuce, et cetera? All of those things play into this, right? And me as a meeting planner, I want to make sure, like it was the romaine lettuce recall. And I sat down when my grandmother was alive at a Longhorn Steakhouse, and I looked at the waitress. I'm like, hey, is your romaine safe? And she's like, what? And she went and got the manager over, and he's like, yep, all of our romaine is safe. We source it from these places, but it's having that, it's not just food allergens, but that's the one that's getting into the news as much, but 100%. And I'm going to say, put it in your contracts. I'm telling planners to put it into your contracts, and you can say, we are not an allergen-free facility, but this is what we do. This is the food safety training that we have. These are the number of staffs. And maybe you've got an allergen person that you can say, TJ actually said this, that at his property, they've got an allergen person on staff for every single food function. So that person can go to that person and a culinary concierge is what I call them, you know, so they can answer the questions of what's in all of these different foods.
Our chef, she's really good at providing, like, I just be like, hey, this is a list of
Right.
all these allergies, look at the menu,
Yeah.
that's already in the events tomorrow, but.
Right,
they're
yeah.
the expert, like,
And it's good to have a venue partner, or maybe a vegan restaurant, or
Yeah.
a certain type of restaurant in your Rolodex that you have a relationship with. Say, listen, I don't have time to do all of this, so here's my plan, here's my go-to person. And they've already done the work, they do it every single day, day in and day out, so.
Yep, yep.
You know.
Exactly. You're welcome. All good?
Great.
All right.
Thank you.